Hello guys, Chris here and welcome to episode 27 of the Pocket Podcast. Today we have an awesome guest in Frank Greeff. This guy has an awesome story from being a chef as he was growing up, and then at 20 years old he decided to leave that career which was his dream and start a business with his brothers, which then went on to sell for $180 million to a company by the name of Domain, which if you're in Australia you would know that that is the place that you go to look for real estate to rent or buy. And he's got an awesome story, but more specifically, we honed in on all the hard times, the challenging times where he was questioning whether any of this is going to work. And he had his wife tapping him on the shoulder saying everything is going to be okay when he could not sleep some nights. This was an awesome show and I cannot wait to dive straight into it and hopefully you guys enjoy. But before we jump right into this episode with Frank, we need to take a minute to thank our sponsors of the podcast, Switch Nutrition. I want to talk about foundational health and more specifically, these products that are in my hands right now. I've got the Adrenal, the Hydrate, and then the Collagen. I take these products every single day and I absolutely love them to look after my foundational health. There are so many different supplements out there and different people telling you different things, but I love to strip it right back to the basics and what are the important things that we should be doing every single day to take care of our foundational health. And these products that are in my hand are the ones that I absolutely love. I take Hydrate every single morning, Adrenal every single night before bed, and then I have the collagen protein powder within my yogurt bowls every single day. And these things help me stay on track with my health and fitness. So if you guys want to check out any of Switch Nutrition's products, you can go to the link in the description or the show notes below. And that is my collections page, which has all the products that I love and take every single day. And if you use code Chris Griffin, you can get 20% off your entire order. Alternatively, go to switchnutrition.com.au and use the code Chris Griffin for 20% off your entire order. Without further ado, I am so excited for you to listen to this conversation with Frank Greeff. You guys enjoy. Before the show, I got you to write down a quote for me. It was something that you love, something that came to mind straight away. And you wrote, I love this verse. You wrote, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time."
That's right.
Mate, talk to me about that quote and what that means to you.
So it's, when you ask that question, firstly I was like, I have no idea where that quote is from and I'm sure maybe someone can help me, but it was like a mantra in our business. There's different moments and different times where we had to make these like huge changes, whether it be the merger, whether it be changing product, whether it be, so many options. And you would look at like the precipice, which is like the mountain in front of you. And if you think about that in its totality, you just shit your pants, right? And so you always used to be a thing we just ask one another, the brothers, like, how do you eat an elephant? It's like one bite at a time. Like, let's go, like one step in front of the other, piece by piece. And then before you know it, it's done.
It's the same with everything in life though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But too many people they get scared by it and then they never take that first step.
Exactly.
I remember one of the sales trainers that I was learning from when I was a little kid, when I was probably 16, first starting out in business. He did a Shark Tank interview and he went on Shark Tank and they got some money on board and stuff, Swish sales coaching. And anyway, I remember he was saying to the sharks, he goes like, they're like, what's the big vision? What's the big goal and stuff? He's like, look, there's all these things that I want to do, but like for me, I just like to look 90 days, play matches, win matches, play matches, win matches. And I think it's a really powerful thing to go, we've got this big thing that we're trying to achieve, but let's just strip it right back down to what is the next step that I can take. And that's so powerful. And so that's been a mantra that you use throughout that whole journey with that business?
Like through everything since that day. And I think it was actually our mum that said it to us. I think it was my eldest brother was freaking out. He's on the phone to mummy. And then mummy goes, how do you eat an elephant, son? He's like, what the shit are you talking about? Yeah. And then he came back, he's like, one bite at a time.
Yeah. And so you obviously in business with your brothers, and we'll definitely talk a lot about that. I do want to take it a little bit further back just to start things off so people have a bit of context on who you are. But you were in business with your two brothers, sold to a company that we all know, Domain, for $180 million. That's very public. But I want to go back to before that, you're a chef.
Yep.
And so you like to cook meals.
Love cooking meals.
And then as a child, was there always a drive or a spark that you loved about cooking? Or talk to me about your childhood and what got you kickstarted into, food and becoming a chef.
So I literally actually can't remember a time where I didn't want to be a chef. So like one of my earliest memories, of loving food was at like 9 years old at primary school, like we got to bake a brownie, and I just thought it was like the best thing in the world. And so I can't remember when I decided I wanted to do it. All I just remember is that's all I wanted to do. And so like during school, I did food tech, advanced food tech, and hospitality to the detriment of my end score, because it was like terrible, because those are terribly ranked subjects. But that's all I wanted to do. And even I was incredibly lucky that my parents, they knew I wanted to do that, so they knew I was gunning for that in everything I did. So even at school, there's an opportunity where I worked in a cafe. There was an Italian chef, and he said, "Oh well, do you want to go and stay with my parents for 6 weeks, and I'll hook you up with 3 restaurants, and you can go and work in Italy." I'm like, okay. So I my parents let me not be at school and go and work in Italy for 6 weeks at 3 different restaurants. And I'd done that, multiple times, kind of saved up money, gone somewhere overseas and learnt, like from my auntie Marianne. I'm in New Zealand, and she's teaching me how to make a roast chicken with with lemon and thyme stuffing, which I make every Christmas. So like I can't remember it. All I remember is being incredibly passionate, and I still am today. Like I love food, to my detriment sometimes.
But surely you would have been a kid, and everyone says like, chef, insane hours, little money.
Yeah.
And all of these boxes don't seem to be ticked. Like, did that scare you when you were a kid, going like, okay, what am I getting myself into? Yes, I love food, but I don't always have to monetize my passion in a sense. If I love cooking, like what made you want to get into that?
So it's so funny that you say that, because that's exactly how I think about the life today. Like not like just because it's your passion doesn't mean you have to commercialize it. I'm 100% there. But I had this perfect mix of ignorance and naivety, which is kind of what helped us start a business too. And my parents, I'm so fortunate. It was just like, hey, you're so passionate about this. Like, great, do it. You know what I mean? Like they weren't like, you have to go to university. And I was acutely aware of what it looked like to be a chef. So during high school, we had a roof over our head and everything like that. But like there wasn't pocket money, there wasn't extra cash floating around. So from a very young age, I got my first job. I think I was either 11 or 12. So it was a cash in hand. So that's like child labor. But anyway, we won't get into that. And then during high school, I had 3 jobs in the kitchen. So 1 washing dishes, 1 being a waiter, and 1 being in the kitchen. So like, I just was like, I would just say the words, 60 hours a week. I'm like, easy. You know what I mean? Like I didn't actually really think about it until I truly did it, and then went, oh, that's a lot of hours, a lot of hours and shit time.
It's kind of like you were pigeonholed in this thing, because everything you were doing was in hospitality.
Everything.
And so when you look at what am I doing with my life? Oh, chef. That's the best thing I can do in this scene.
And I love the thought of it. Like even like so during that high school period, we all go out, all that fun stuff, go to parties and stuff. Every Saturday, every Sunday, 6 a.m. I'd be in the kitchen. So it didn't matter what I did on Saturday night. The next morning I'd be in the kitchen. So I already knew kind of, you do a full week of work. I mean, it's a full week of school, and then you're in the kitchen. So I was kind of preparing for it. And I just like, there's nothing that brings me as much joy as like giving people food. But I wouldn't go back before you ask.
Yeah. And I want to tie back into this thing you're just saying. You said ignorance and naivety. I love that, because I've used this a lot, age and naivety. And I believe that my age and naivety is what literally has got me to where I am. And I flipped the age and naivety as a negative thing when being a young person in business. You're too young to do this. You're too naive. And I flipped that and used that to my advantage. When you said that ignorance and naivety is what helped you and it's what unlocked all of these doors, like, do you have examples of the moments in your life with that, or was there, what made you like think of that?
So many, and I only think about it in reverse. I do a weird amount of reflection, because I don't want to be that person who like chases. One day is 60 and is like, did I even like celebrate a win? So I try and consciously do that. And it was just like, because I get asked the question, like, why would you start a business at 20? You wanted to be a chef, all of a sudden you didn't. And it was like, well, our version of a business plan was me and my brother sat down in front of a piece of paper and went, okay, we can sell this one product for $230. We could probably get 10 out a day. We can do it 5 days a week. Great. That's like X many grand. We're going to be rich as. Let's go. And so but in reality, like you haven't thought about all of these permutations, all the terrible things that can go wrong, and you have no idea what business looks like. And that's that ignorance, the naivety. And then you just go and do it. You don't let those things hold you back, because you're like, oh, what's the worst that can happen?
When I look at the naivety for me, I remember I would go to all these free business events and they're not free. They want you, they're trying to sell all of these courses. I could never afford any of the courses. I was like 16 years old. Yeah. But I remember going into those rooms, unlocked all the doors. It's like I would wait till someone would leave and then I would speak to the speaker up on the stage, and then all of a sudden I'm working for them, and one thing led to another. But you spoke about reflection there, and like, what do you reflect for? Because you mentioned you were reflecting to make sure you don't get to 70 and go, shit, like what doesn't be my life? Do you reflect to kind of appreciate how far you've come, or do you reflect to learn, or why are you reflecting?
Everything from every column, what you've just said. So number one is around learning. So I, from very early on in business and still to this day, either in the form of a journal or just in my mind, will leave a conversation, a sales pitch, a negotiation, and I'll be like, what could I have done better? What went well? Or even reflect on like the person's inflections, like as I was talking to them, what was the tonality of their voice, or what happened in their eyes as I said something. And so I try and reflect to go like, okay, is there something I can do incrementally better next time? And that's a practice and principle that I followed all the way through and try to help the team learn. But then it's also the other one, which I think is super important, is like the way I'm ingrained in the DNA in me, and it's a blessing and a curse for so many entrepreneurs, is like, next. And so I'm really conscious that like, even in those early years of business, we didn't kind of celebrate those things. We were like, one day when we make 20 grand a month, and then that day comes, you're like, oh yeah, that's all right. And you just move on. And like, I could kind of see the trap in the final years of business. I could see that trap like, okay, it's coming to that crescendo. Something's going to happen. And I don't want to fall into that trap where it's like, you've got to celebrate different things. And not stop and reflecting, oh, I'm amazing, I'm the best, how good am I? But just like, wow, this is so cool. So last week, I was in Melbourne and I had lunch with Grant Hackett. And I sat on the plane, I wrote in my journal, went, you just had lunch with Grant Hackett, like an Olympian, and we're having a great chat. I was like, that's so cool. I was like, wow. And then just like, there's a little moment of reflection, and then you kind of keep going, just to make sure you're in the habit of appreciating things, because it gives you perspective. Because if you don't, then soon you're like, just fully out of touch with reality.
Did you learn that from getting disappointed so many times, by having like an expectation on how you're going to feel when you reach something, and then you reach it and you don't feel that certain way, and then you're disappointed because the gap between that expectation is disappointment with the reality? Did you learn that by having this disappointment time and time again with different milestones that you hit? So then you kind of go, I need to remove this expectation, and I need to remove this feeling that I'm supposed to feel when I achieve something, so then you could be in that position you are now in terms of like, yeah.
So if I said yes, I'd be lying. But the way you framed that is exactly what I had learned not to do. So what I mean by that is, I, since day one, have listened to an ungodly amount of content about everything and anything. And so part of those final years of the business was all about learning, like, what does it look like post-exit? And I had these opportunities to learn and listen to different people talk about that feeling, talk about that sense of like not soaking it in, and then talk about not, the expectation of the day the deal closes, and then the reality of like, you're in your PJs and it's 4 a.m. and you're like, oh, fuck, that feels weird. And so it was actually through learning about other people talking about it that then I made it a practice in my life more consistently, where, one person who I'm close with, he had a family member or a family friend, and he had said to him on his like deathbed, he goes, I see myself in you, and I always worked every year I would be like, when you're 60 years old, you're going to then have a relationship with your kids and you're going to unwind. And that was on his 60th, he'd been alive for 60 years and he was passing away. And he was like, if I could take anything back, it would be like, just stop, smell the roses, and spend more time with your family. And like hearing that message, and that was closing in towards our exit, I was like, okay, that is exactly what I need to try and avoid. That's the trap I need to try and avoid. It's like, okay, one day I'll be excited, but right now, get stuck in.
Let's go to that time when you're about to exit and you're kind of, it's coming in a sense. It's not certain, but you see where this is going, and you see the likelihood is slowly getting more and more and more that you're going to have this sale. Like, let's go to that moment. You've obviously already had this realization, this learning of like, not tying yourself to that outcome, and you're like, I'm trying to be present, trying to be present. What was the things going on in your mind when you're nearing this exit before you sold the domain for $180 million?
In all honesty, I was nearing my version of a mental breakdown. Like, so I always say nearing my, because I don't know what it truly feels like to like have a proper mental breakdown. So I got to like contextualize in my world. So I wasn't in like a really super good place, you know? So sometimes I reflect on, I kind of go back again, reflect on, there would be nights where I would sound so weird, and you'll be like, no, that sounds like a proper mental breakdown. I would be laying in bed, and with my fingers, I would be drawing out the words of like the advisors or something like over and over again for like an hour. So it'd be like DLA Piper, DLA, like why are you doing that? And it's because the piece there that you raised, which was like the surety piece, it doesn't come till the last minute. And then there's all the added complexities from like the emotional layer, the emotional toll, the risk that you've taken. So for us, contextually, our business cost us $5.2 million to sell. And until the day you sign that deal and the money lands in your bank, you have no guarantee. So at any moment, there's not like a deposit or something and that's okay. Once you've chosen that party, now all the rest of the parties go cold. If it goes cold in your negotiation, which is the final 4 weeks, see you later. Because now if you go back to them, well, they're going to have a reprice discussion. And I had shareholders in my business, which we merged with, double my age, been in business as long as I've been alive, tell me like, I was a CEO at the time. They said, Frank, you're doing the wrong thing. Like, I know far better than you. You're wasting our money and you're going to waste almost a year's profit over this terrible decision. And I had to like have that plus many other things happening. And so I think it just pushed me to this brink. So to kind of bring it home is like, how was I feeling? I think it wasn't a reality until it was truly there in front of me. And you have to play this game of like, you can't get caught up in the, start shopping for the house or start shopping for the car, because like you're setting yourself up for like emotional failure. Because now you've kind of like, you've almost planned your way out of it, and then trying to come back in, game over. So you had to be really careful not to do it.
Yeah, and I remember speaking with Simon Beard, and he was saying a similar thing about how his bumhole's just clenched the whole time until the money comes in the bank, really, because you don't know. Things can change. It's not like a little deal that you're handshaking and putting in the back. And I guess that's one of those things. But when you're reflecting, as we've been talking about a lot in this pod, and you're doing these drawings with your finger, when you reflect on those times, like, why were you drawing those names and what was going on in your mind?
I think a lot of it is to do with I subconsciously process stress. And I think what was happening, without speaking to a psychologist, my wife's one, so thankfully, is it was like trying to keep my mind and body busy to essentially not allow this like subconscious stress to come to the forefront. And it was like, because I went through these periods of insomnia. And so it was like a way in which to like not think about everything that just happened that day. And it was just like almost like zoning out, and not by design, I just was doing it. So like I don't even think I've fully been able to unpack the why behind it, but I just think there was so many things that I was on the brink with that thankfully things panned out good, because it was it was touch and go there for a few moments in that. There was a period in time where in that period there was a breakdown of the relationship between my brothers. And like there was a moment there that I thought like the whole family's going to break up. And that was the emotional pressure added onto, all of these other layers that like, I remember sitting in front of my notebook, and my wife's, behind me patting my back, and I'm crying, like bawling my eyes out. And I'm writing down their like positions, and they wouldn't want to talk to each other at the time. And I had to try and figure out like, how do I bridge this gap? Because like everything's on the line here. So yeah, there's a lot. I just don't know if I fully unpacked and understood like the small minutiae of certain things that I did at that time.
What happened between the brothers? And it's just like, was it because of the business or outside of business?
So I'm so grateful and so thankful to have worked with my brothers. I wouldn't be here today talking to you. No one would be listening to this, because it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for getting into business with my brothers. but starting a business at age, I was 20, the next one was 23, the next one's 25. You've almost come, me almost just out of high school, them like still at that young age. You've carried over the older brother, younger brother, middle brother relationship into business. And so decisions aren't made like a normal co-founding cohort. It's made sometimes in the lens of like, well, I'm the oldest brother, or you're the, it took us time to kind of figure that all out. But I think the reality is that some of those things carried over the long period. And so sometimes there was, we had very tense moments, multiple of them, 2 or 3, where things felt like they were breaking down. But it's just like, because you're not just talking about the challenge with the business, you're talking about, but also, at the age 3 when, you touch my Lego, like it's like carrying over like your entire life, and then you're arguing over something that's like really small, but it's like compounding everything together.
It's like you have all these little bottles, and they just keep bottling up in your mind, bottle up, and you're holding on to all these things.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden something bursts. It doesn't need to be something so massive. It's just the fact that there's so many little things. Why was the youngest brother the CEO? You.
Yeah. I was like, oh, who is he? No. So the skill set looks like this. My eldest brother is like a super genius, almost savant, and as is my middle brother. So my eldest brother taught himself how to become a software engineer from age 15 from Google, has never had a job apart from Domino's, right? And as we sold the business, was a CTO and literally the highest and best performing software engineer there is. But that's his skill set. And then my middle brother was incredibly good at, he ended up being a software engineer too, but he was good at, his thing was always, how do I make myself redundant? So he would go into like what you consider the most minutiae task, build the entire process around that task, be happy to sit there for 10, 11 hours and just lock in. We're like, I can't sit still for like 17 minutes. And then build the process, train the people, and then move on. And for me, I could talk to people, right? So I think, by the time it came to the merger, and the merging entity said, we want you to be the CEO, it's because I had built a reputation because I was the one talking to the customers. So when they knew of RealHub, they knew of Frank, even though it wasn't a business of one, but they just knew of me because I was the person in the door, shaking the hands, kissing the babies. So I think, logically it made sense because the way I thought about it, rightly or wrongly, I'd never done the job, is I was a salesperson externally, and now as a CEO, I'm a salesperson internally. Now it's like, I'm not trying to convince a customer. I'm trying to bring 400 people together and get them to have buy-in to the vision, and we all move forward in the right direction. And so parking the younger brother thing, it made sense from a skill set piece. And
then I guess also when it comes to that, like, the age doesn't really matter. It's as you said, it's experience and maturity in whatever field that is.
Yes.
Now you're saying, okay, I was a better communicator, sales.
Yes.
When you're trying to be the CEO, where you're the founder, you're painting the vision, and you've got to manage that, and communication is so important. It makes sense that you're the CEO. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I feel like there's got to be a lot of people listening that go younger, like when you're going into business together, you're all sitting around a round table thinking about who's going to be who. And then you go, okay, there's as you said earlier, like a little bit of a divide where, there is an older brother and there's things that are getting carried into that business from when you were 3 years old. But it's cool to be able to get to a stage where you go, like, I'm sure when you started it, you weren't CEO. It was like, okay, we need to get some systems and processes in place.
I was a little annoying brother Frank. Definitely not. So that's the thing. We actually didn't really have titles until year 7 of the business. So it took us 7 years because we didn't care about that. We cared about the outcome. What's the outcome? We want to have a huge business that makes heaps of cash, like just being honest. And only until we had a merged entity was it like, okay, now we have roles, responsibilities, titles, and kind of like what's your lane? And that's actually where, from the relationship of the brothers, apart from the one little moment, 99% of the time, that was the best time because it's like everybody had their lane and they could go full steam ahead and not kind of worry too much about one another's lane.
And I want to go back to when we were talking about you writing people's names at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Creeped you out. Everybody's listening like, what is wrong with this guy?
No, well, it's crazy because you have to be somewhat crazy to do a journey like you've been on, right? And we got to recognize that we're not normal beings. You've got to be somewhat of a sicko, right?
Definitely not.
But there's a lot easier ways.
Certified sicko.
There's a lot easier ways to live life, right? Fulfilling ways, not too sure, but there's a lot easier ways to live life, that's for sure. Well, I want to go back to that moment, and more specifically, you mentioned a key point there where you were breaking down and you had your wife Holly just tapping you on the back, supporting you, being there. I'm assuming this wasn't just like a one night thing. This was probably a very ongoing process, especially on those in some of the really dark and hard times of business.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been really taxing on her, I guess. And the support and belief that she would have had to have in you would have been absolutely massive. Like, talk to me about that moment and how important Holly was for you in that journey.
This is where I might start crying. I'm really conscious of when you do something like this, or let me just speak from my own point of view. Having done something like this is like, there's things that are controllables and things that are uncontrollables, and the things that I am lucky and fortunate to have. And I always like to identify those, to not be like, okay, here's the the blueprint, and buy my ebook for $7.99. This is how you make 180 mil. Because there's things that I didn't necessarily do, and they were given to me, and I'm so grateful for. And Holly is one of them. So my context is I was maybe I have to show this on the trailer. I was a fat little boy at school, and so I never had a girlfriend. I was not very good with the girls. I was very good at making friends with them. And then one day I wasn't fat, and then the hottest girl in high school, Holly, was my best friend, and we turned out to be boyfriend and girlfriend. And I never let go because like I love and adore her, and she's incredible. But back to your point is the part that I'm so lucky and grateful for is we've followed this journey together where, she went off, did 7-8 years of university, became a psychologist. Now she's a clinical psychologist. I was simultaneously doing this business with my brothers. And what I'm lucky for is that we both grew as individuals, and that I'm 100% know that there's no like, oh, you've had an exit and then if this person comes, you're like, oh, is it because of the cash? Like, it's none of that, because she was there when I earned $400 a week, and there's no difference in her eyes towards me. It was like she just fully believed in me. So to your point, it's like there must have been an emotional burden. I think it was the challenge I imagine for her is like she sees me where 99% of the time I'm pretty cool, calm and collected. And then to see at the time I was, we were already husband and wife, sitting there bawling his eyes out in front of a piece of paper. And you're like, I just want this to go away. And the exact words she said to me is like, this is not your fight to fight. Like, this is too much for you. Like just let it go. And I was like, I can't. Like, this is my fight to fight. Like, this is the thing I have to do. But she was always there. She was always my rock. And like, I am so thankful and grateful. And now with the next chapter, like, she's the most incredible mum, and she's so kind and loving. And like, I'm very fortunate to have her. I don't know if I just took us on a steer us away, but I can never give my wife, Holly, enough praise, because I adore her.
So when she tells you that it's not your fight to fight and you say, no, it is, like, how does that conversation go? Does she go, okay, I support you either way? Or does she go, that's like, I'm trying to do the best thing for you and you're going against it, and there's a little bit of a divide there? How does she go in that moment? Never.
So she would, I have a risk tolerance and a risk appetite that's far greater than hers. So there'd be times in business where, for example, my brother and I, Jacques, we sold our apartments so that we could reduce our salaries to $400 a week, so that we could hire more people and we could move in together, him and his wife, me and my wife, in a 2-bedroom apartment. And at that time, Holly's like surely, like, this is like part of an essay, like, what are you doing? And like, but she knows that when I say like, hey, appreciate that, totally understand, but like, I believe in this, she'll then go, okay, great, support you. So there's never, to that point around, I'm like, no, this is my fight to fight. That's kind of the end of it. And she realizes, okay, like, go. Like, what can I do to support? There's never like, well, I'm trying to help, and like some bitterness. It's just like, okay, like, clearly you believe in this, because we can have that honest communication the whole way through, rather than, I think it's for her, it's more like, you just don't want to see that person you love have that burden, and you just want to help them. And often people will do that, right? It's like, you're like, I want to start this business. And you're like, oh, don't do that, because you don't want to see them, fail or something. You just want to be nice, but like, the reality is like, that's not always the best way. And, fighting through that fight. It's like, you imagine people when they it's not the same, but imagining people go to war and the loved one's like, oh no, don't do that. It's like, well, no, I need to, I need to. And I think, there was never like a tension moment created from those things with Holly.
I think it's crazy to see that you've just been with her the whole time. Because when I look at, say, my journey or someone else's, there's all this stigma around, you can't have a partner while you're building, and like you're going to be distracted and all this. And I love when, and like Simon Beard, obviously, he when he talks about his story with his
So cool.
with Tani. Like I remember on the podcast when I did with him, I was talking about how I would love a partner that's 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And he's like, yeah, I think Tani and I are 1 + 1 = 11 because we're way better than just two people, but then also we're parallel and aligned.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I thought that is so cool. And
Cool.
it gives you the belief that those are out there. And when you look at, relationships and trying to find that person, I guess it's being able to have this checklist of all the things that you need to help guide you on help assist you on your journey. And then if someone comes up in your life, even in a growth phase, take a risk and give it a go, I think, is kind of where I'm at with relationships. Because like
Absolutely.
we take risks in our business, we take risks in
yeah.
everywhere else, but we don't take risks when it comes to that for a lot of people. So it's cool. But then the thing is like you keep talking about how you had insomnia days, nights where you couldn't sleep, and I'm assuming she's in the bed with you those nights.
Sure is.
That night where she's tapping you on the shoulder,
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But is there any moments that come to mind straight away where it was really bad and you're going like as Elon Musk says, my mind's a storm, like when your mind is just nonstop? It's always when your head hits the pillow as well, right? You're somewhat okay, and then your head hits the pillow and you're like exploded.
Yeah.
Was there any moments that come to mind straight away on the journey that stand out in particular where it was a storm and Holly was there for you?
Yes, and this is this is an unfortunate story that's so good that I can't share because it's just one of those things that is a confidentiality piece. But there was a moment in time right towards the brink of the deal where it all looked like it was going in the bin, and that would be the single hardest moment. And I unfortunately can't share the why, but that was the most challenging. But let me actually bring it home for not just the Holly part there, but the relationship with the brothers. There was a period in there where I had tried to sell the business myself, and the times hadn't gotten so dark yet, but I tried to sell the business myself, and I was unsuccessful.
Yourself without your brothers?
No, sorry. Without, sorry, that's a very good piece of context. Without an advisor. Right. So you can go and get a deal team who's like, they do negotiations. You get a legal due diligence team, financial due diligence team, tech due diligence. And so you create like a team of 15 people, and that hence why it costs $5.2 million. And that's your super team to go and sell this thing. Now, I was the face of it, so I'd be doing the pitching, but they'd be in your corner like, this is how you negotiate, right? And I thought, man, I'm so good at selling, I can do it myself. and man, I was wrong.
Naivity coming back into play.
Sometimes it doesn't pay off. And so I try to go through that. It didn't work out. And then the rest, those shareholders started saying, "Matt, like your timing's off, brother. Like, get back in your corner. Like, come on, champ." And I remember, like, I was sitting down and I was kind of ready to give up. And at the time, I'd already been doing it for about 6-7 months. And Jacques says to me in my office, I remember so clearly, he's like, "You cannot give up. Like, right now is the time. You need to keep going. You're the only person that can do this. Back yourself." And I was minutes away from making the decision not to do it. And the reality is I was the only one who could do it. And only because you have that person that you fully trust in your corner, and they know what's not best for you, like mentally right then and there, but they know what's going to be best for you over time. They're there and they're like fighting for you, fighting with you. And like, I'm forever grateful for that moment with Jacques, because like, and that's just one example. There's so many of those where we're all backing each other up, but I just remember that so clearly. I'm like, it was a crossroads, and a crossroads that life is exponentially different. Because here's the reality, like, again, back to the luck that happens. We did sell the business at the peak of the market. I sat down with my advisor. We had a celebration dinner. A guy called James Yee, Adastra, absolute gangster when it comes to negotiation, and my legal guy, Adrian from DLA Piper. And they said to me, "If you had waited 4 weeks, this business would be worth $40 million less." And I'm like, holy fuck. and Jacques knew it in him, like, because we follow kind of macro trends. America was printing more money than it ever printed in that year, and like obviously the business was in an incredible position, but there was just, there was tailwinds keeping everything looking really great. And then the bubble burst across the world. Like if you remember, like buying a secondhand car post-COVID was like triple the amount of a brand new car. It was everything. So every type of asset was inflated, and like fortunately for us, we timed it perfection. There's part of it which we knew, but there's a lot we didn't know. And there was part of it, like, so like these things happen.
Yeah. And so then you sold the business, and that the final deal went over. You've spoken about it a few times. It was at like 3 or 4 a.m. or something ridiculous in the morning.
Yeah.
And you sold the business. And I think we have to talk about the feeling there. Remember, again, going back to Simon, he was talking about his bumhole set eventually.
Finally released.
He could stop the quenching.
Best shit he's ever done.
He could actually breathe,
Yeah.
and after the chaos, because people just see the number. And I think when you look at social media, everything you search your name, $180 million, right, and the number, and that's all everyone sees. But the part of the iceberg below the water that is all of it, basically, and all the chaos, all the shit that you have to go through, $5.2 million just to even sell the business, like all the stuff people don't see. Talk to me about the relief and the feeling you had, or just the feeling overall when that money did hit the bank.
So the money hitting the bank was a real special moment, right? And so you've heard many times the anticlimactic feeling of the deal being done. But I'll never forget the moment where I got a text from my brothers. I'm in a meeting now with the CEO of Domain, Jason Pellegrino, and I get a text from my brothers, and they said, "Check your bank account." and I refresh, and like, look, I've never been to war, so I don't know what it feels like. But all I know is my ears started ringing, and I could no longer hear the conversation in the office. And I said, "I'm so sorry, I need to go to the bathroom." And I had to excuse myself because it was like, "Nee," and I left, and I went into the bathroom, and I was like, oh my, if there was, that was where there was a huge relief. That's where finally we could be like, okay, at that point it was 10 years. I owned a Volkswagen Golf and like 50 grand worth of shares. And that was my net wealth position. We had no property. We had nothing. We were renting. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is it. We can we're set. Like Holly and I can go buy a house and stuff. And that was the most rewarding feeling. But more than anything was we had donated shares to my parents prior to the sale. And so then getting to call them and go, check your bank account, and there's $4 million in my parents' bank account. Like there's nothing that will ever compare to that feeling of going like, you made all these sacrifices in your life to, move from South Africa to New Zealand to Australia. Like you literally went from being a nuclear scientist to picking apples and sharpening knives so you could pave a way for your kids to have the best future. And then like, here we can like repay you and like, and give thanks to you. Like that's where like, that's the feeling.
Was all of those times and those feelings quite emotional? Was the sale and the exit, the relief, was it quite an emotional thing? Because you've been through so much shit that the money hits the bank and you go, I fucking deserve this. Because when I look at some of the shit that I've been through, and then I get to where I was, and I go, like, and I just have this massive relief of like, fuck, like I fucking deserve this. Like I've been through all this shit. Like no one can take this away from me, this feeling. Like, did you have a feeling? Was it quite emotional?
So the day the deal was signed, so not the money in the bank, my reaction was, you see, you hear a common theme. Frank likes to cry. I'm an emotional character. I just burst into tears. I was driving to work and the deal had been signed and I was just crying my way to work, and I call Holly. She's like, you've got to come home. She's like, you can't go in the office like that. And I'm like I have to. Like there's so many things to do. And like, it was just, I think it was just like that build up of the casket just go, and you're just like, it's just like, I couldn't even tell you what the emotion was I was feeling. I wouldn't say it was a happy cry. It was just like this crescendo of the last 12 months worth of, it's easily by magnitude of 10, the most intense 12 months of my entire life, like easily. And then you get this moment, it's like, it's done. And then the facade of like, I'm cool, I'm all good, just like blows away. And you're just like, oh, okay, this is real, but also like, what am I feeling right now?
It's so chaos. I mean, obviously I haven't experienced something like that, but I just look at certain things and even for me, when I see someone going through such a hard time that you've been through, and you can see it and you know it, and because you've been there, you know the feeling that they're going through. Like sometimes it doesn't hit me straight away, but sometimes I leave that interaction and for some reason my body just goes back into that moment and I just feel for them.
Yeah.
And I go like I had this married couple, Meg and Will, on the show like a month ago or something, and we had coffee beforehand and telling me their story, and I was literally feeling like what they were going through and how much of a challenge. Yeah, I'm not married, so I don't know the fact they're together, but the position that he was in, Will, I felt it and I knew where he was at. And I remember I got it out, I left that, we went in the car, we were driving to the studio and they were in different cars, and I remember I was just in the car to start breaking down because I'm just looking at what he's going through right now and I'm like, fuck, like I know where he's at and that's fucked. That felt so fucked.
Yeah.
And then I remember I see him when we get to the thing, I just give him this massive hug and I'd give him this pep talk like I would in one of my videos. I literally gave him this pep talk and I just remember this bond that was formed because I could feel it, how much it was.
Yeah.
So when you're going through those like really tough times, I just look at that and just go, fuck, you've got to look back at that sometimes and just go, shit, that was pretty chaos. That was pretty hectic.
Oh yeah, frequently.
Yeah, but then you've made it out the other side now, and you're working on some cool other things that are really cool. I want to tie this back into the always loving cooking from the start, and you shelved that for a little bit to start this business at 20. Like a crazy person, wanted to get into business, and we didn't really talk about why you did that. But I want to fast forward to now. You've exited. Yep. You've got this little bit of freedom where you kind of can do what you want, and you decide that you want to write a cookbook.
Yeah.
And donate all the money to charity.
Yes.
I want to talk about why you wanted to get back into cooking and reliving that chef moment, and then we can go from there.
Easy. So based on all those reflections we talked about before, and based on that conversation around the 60 years old sitting there and going like, was it all worth it? I had this moment, and again, it was with Holly, where we were walking in Manly, and I'm saying to her like, I know the way my brain is, and this was like, we're talking like either 4 weeks after exit or like real close to the exit. And what I knew was, by talking to a guy called David Shane, was he had sold his business for $1 billion in the year 2000. And he said the following year he went through the deepest depression of his life. So I knew what was what I was on the precipice for was, as a man, we need to have purpose. And I say as a man because I can only speak for myself and I'm a man, right? But we need to have a sense of purpose. There needs to be something that each day you're striving towards and you get fulfillment and satisfaction from. And I knew I was about to lose part of that. Like the reality is I'm still CEO, we still have this company, we still want to do great things, but also the entrepreneurial brain is wired that like you need to be tied in, the skin in the game. You need to have that bit of like risk there to like give you that real sense of purpose. So I was like, okay, that's about to happen. But what I don't want to do is just go straight to my next business, because the smart players go straight to your next business, take all the money, leverage it up, invest, and then one day you'll have $1 billion. And I was like, yeah, but why? And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to. And then I was like, oh, but I also have all these skills. I have these skills. I know how to create a product. I know how to commercialize it. I know I have a network. And I went, okay, maybe I need to do it, but do it not for myself. And so there was on that conversation with Holly, I said, okay, here's my thing. I'm going to essentially create a business, but 100% of the revenue is going to go to a charity. And at the time, I didn't know who or what charity. I was just like, a charity. I want to do it beyond myself. And I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And then I was like, what would I do? And I was like, I love cooking. And I was like, I'll write a cookbook. And I literally, it was just in that conversation, that walk, I was like, okay, I'm going to write a cookbook, because I also have like I love being creative too. And it was something that was kind of missing from my life as the CEO, kind of less creativity. And so I kind of bring it all home. I was like, okay, well, what was it that I did during my time? So during the time of the entire business, even as a CEO, and even in the year of the sale, I'd come home and I'd cook for Holly and I 4 or 5 nights a week. And almost every weekend or every second weekend, we'd have friends over and I'd cook for them. And people would ask, like, how do you do that? How can you do this big roll and then go home and cook? Like, I don't understand. It was like, oh, because I can do it fast and I can do it healthy because I care about like macros and all that kind of stuff that some people go, ugh, and some people go, fuck yeah, the boys. so I was like, okay, I want to essentially create a cookbook, which is like, this is my life of recipes, which is for high performing people who are health conscious and time poor, and 100% of the revenue goes to charity. And so I will front the cost of building, creating, designing, marketing, et cetera, of the book, because I'll be self-publishing. It's a long-winded story, but that's kind of how it was started. And literally from that conversation, I started executing within like 2-3 weeks.
And did having that plan where it was not with the intention of making all this money, or maybe there is an intention because you're trying to raise certain money for charity, but did it remove a bit of expectation and a bit of pressure with the task, or is there still a fair bit on there? Like because there's, when you're trying to make money and there's other people involved and all the rest of it, there's this pressure to succeed. But I feel like if you're doing something you're really passionate about doing, and then it's also, there's nothing else ending up in your pocket from doing it, does that change?
Yes and no. So the yes is like the reality of like when we're in business and like you're earning $400 a week, or there was a time where we had 10 weeks of liquidity left and we're like, past that, we're bankrupt and we can't get mortgages for 5 years. That's real pressure. Doing this is going, well, okay, worst case scenario, just move on with life. However, where the pressure does come from is like, I'm a big believer in personal brand. Now, the world kind of thinks about personal brand at the moment as around like, what you look like on YouTube or Instagram or et cetera, which I think about too. But it's also about like you as an individual and your integrity. So when I put my name to something, I need to deliver. So I spoke it out into the world, which is like, I'm going to do $1 million. Like that's the goal. And so for me, like the pressure is like, well, you've said it, Frank. Are you one hit wonder, or can you actually deliver? And so I think I have a healthy amount of pressure on myself, and I've created like pressure milestones where I created fake launch. I was like, okay, in July, I send the cookbook to the printers, and come the 10th of June, I hadn't started. And so I have a full-time videographer, Kai Hanlon, shout out the king. And we, in 7 days, videoed every recipe. I created every recipe, so I had to think about them, photographed and styled all the recipes for the entire cookbook in 7 days with a team of 2. And so each day we would shoot, film everything I just talked about, 10 recipes a day. And on the final day, I poured an entire 2-liter rolling, boiling water pot on myself on my arm, and my entire arm peeled off. And in the videos, what you don't see is like every 2 minutes I pour my water under it because I still have 4 to go. So I say that about the pressure because I think there's this necessary amount of pressure that you need to create to make things great, personally.
Yeah.
I'm still a procrastinator at heart.
Yeah. I think putting that pressure on, it's like when you give yourself 4 hours to do something, it'll take you 4 hours.
Yeah, that's right.
Give yourself 60 minutes, you'll get it done in 60 minutes. I love having those time crunches and those things there because it actually does get things done. Yeah. Even when I notice, like if I don't schedule something in the morning, it's a lot easier to press snooze.
Oh, so much easier.
Yeah. I want to talk about the motivation though, because do you think something like this cookbook and the things that you're working on now will suffice in terms of your fulfillment? Because obviously you've been spending so long building this company, it's chaos. Is it a relief, like I'm not going back to anything like that anymore and I want to do this? Or where's your head at with that?
Zero chance. Zero chance. So it was a moment in time, a span breaker to create like an opportunity to kind of soak in like, yes, how great, how exciting we've done this, and then be ready to go. So like my brain I finished up with Domain. So I stepped down as CEO last year. We started kind of unwinding my role, and only 2 weeks ago I finished up with Domain. So I'm officially, air quotes, retired. And my brain's already started clicking. My brain's ticking away. And I had a super interesting opportunity land on my desk yesterday. Me and my brother Jacques we're scouting. We're looking. There's not a time pressure, but we're red hot looking because there's just so much joy and satisfaction out of the building and creating something. So one of the things I do now is I do mentoring work for scaling up businesses, where I have a wide range of, not many people. I don't advertise it because I don't want to box myself into becoming the ebook guy, the online business course guy. I'm very scared of those, like the guru. But I do it for people. I'm like, okay, well, I can gel. This is good. your business is great. I can see a high performance in you, and like, okay, we can help. I can work together with you. And so I have, a person who's in like renewable energy, and I'm we're talking about gigawatts of electricity, and I'm trying to figure out like, okay, what are the things here to push you forward? Then I got a tech company with like $4.5 to $5 million worth of recurring revenue, and each month they're growing on 10, 20% a month. I'm like, okay, how do we, like all these different types, and it just keeps my brain in the game, but also sharpening my skills to go, once you can once you can distill a lot of information, which is like when you first go there, what's your business? Distill heaps of information in an hour, and then the following hour kind of figure out what are these, what are the key drivers? And then the following month we can look back and go, holy shit, like we just made like huge impact in a small period of time. That then becomes like a superpower. And so that's just keeping me in the game, keeping me, I never wanted to be the professional athlete who's telling the same story about that time they caught the ball when they're 60 and they kind of been retired ever since they were like 27. I was like, if I'm talking about the $180 million deal when I'm 50, like kids were like, oh, like kill me, Dad! Like, mate, that was a long time ago before AI took over the world champ. Like, just shut up, Dad. So I don't want to be that. And so like to answer your question, there's a zero chance I'm not going to be going again. It'll be reasonably soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I want to go back to the journey a little bit so we can just talk a bit more about this business journey, because I think when people are listening, they're probably, a lot of them might be starting out. A lot of people are still in that, and they want to know.
Yes.
And they want to know these insights. There was a part that I'm really, really fascinated by. You said on another podcast about a story with your dad buying like discounted stuff at Woolies. Yeah. And I really want to talk about this because I have an interesting thought around a scarce mindset.
Yeah.
Like when I see that, I think straight away scarce. Correct. And having this scarce mindset. And I feel like that's really negative in a lot of senses, but you used it as like a positive when it comes to business. Having that as your upbringing, buying all the discounts, eating off food all the time.
Oh yeah.
Like,
well, off by label standards.
Yeah,
it still tastes
Most
good.
people wouldn't eat it. Most people wouldn't eat it. I was listening to that going, if the milk's 6 days old, I'm not drinking it.
Yeah. If the milk's less than 6 days old, we're like, what a treat.
But I want to go back to that. I want to talk about scarce mindset. And I think what's been really powerful for me is having more of an abundance mindset, because I think when you have a scarce mindset, you kind of put money on a pedestal a little bit. And I think things that are on a pedestal are hard to get. And I found when I removed that, because I had a lot of that in my family too, when I removed that, it was a lot easier to have money flow in my life because the value I held it wasn't like a thing that was so hard to get. I want to talk about your upbringing, how you've been brought up with this really big scarce mindset, and then you've taken that into business and used it as a superpower you're explaining. Can we talk a little bit about that?
For sure. So the context for everybody is my dad was in business with someone. He's a wheeler and dealer. They moved 23 times in South Africa. He got into business with someone who frauded him, went completely bankrupt. So that's when they moved to New Zealand. And so the context is, we can talk about the scarce mindset, but like I think the reality, and I'll never know what it feels like, is like when everything is scarce, it's like, things like, it's like when people came back from, I feel like I keep coming back to wartime. Maybe it's the sign of the times. When people come back from war and you're like holding that loaf of bread, like you ain't letting a single crumb get to waste. And so that was, and still to this day, like he still has that, bless his socks. It wasn't uncommon that we'd go to the mall and you'd see someone had finished their meal and he'd be like, oh, there's heaps of good chicken there, and go grab it and bring it back. Legit.
Like, there's no way.
100%. Like I've seen it many times. I even did it as a joke last year in the south of France to my friends because I thought it was hilarious to bring it back home for my dad. There was a €700 steak on the menu, and I was like, I'm not spending €700 on a steak. And then I saw these guys didn't finish it, and I was like, said to Holly, reckon I should ask for some? And then she's like, don't you dare. And I was like, oh, now I have to. And so I did. Anyway, shout out to my dad. And so like, because he hates waste. And so he would take me shopping to Woolworths. He would show me the discounts and be like, look at this chocolate milk. It's 15 cents. Like, this is going to be good for 3 more days. I'm like, yes. And so like the value that was created was understanding how far a dollar can be stretched when used wisely. Like, because here's the truth of the matter. None of those, not that I go discount shopping these days, but like none of those items are going to be off past the use by date in one day. Why? Because they wouldn't risk it as a food company. So they always bring it back a few days earlier because they don't want to sell you something that's actually off. And so my dad leveraged that, right? And so how does that become a superpower in business? I think it is a juggling act. Because if you just think through that lens, and here's again that beautiful relationship with the brothers, my eldest brother probably held on to that a lot longer than me and my middle brother, because he felt it and he lived it a lot clearer than we did. So when I mentioned we dropped to $400 a week salary, the reason why is Jacques and I want to hire one more person, and Ken said there's no way we're going to spend another $800. So that's why we sold our apartments. That's why we dropped our money to $400, because we went, well, now we're taking the decision away from you. We'll just do it. Right? So the balance there is you have that scarcity. You have to have some abundance. But what that means is, part of the challenges I see in the 2024 business landscape is every time I go somewhere and I'm talking to an early stage startup, founder, whatever, it's all about the next capital raise. That's what they're talking about. It's less about getting the customer and the profitability and stuff like that. It's all about I'm just raising 2 million at a 10 mil val, and my next raise will be this and that. And that's not a fundamental to a business. You don't need to always go on a roadshow. And so by us knowing that, hey, this, we just started with a 10 grand credit card, but we made every single dollar work. It meant we never raised capital. Why? Because we just knew that we could continually use our money really smartly, and so that we could grow off the own cash. So you're 100% right though, because if you have that scarcity mindset, it's really hard to get cash. But it's like this little bit of a juggling act. So you want to have an abundant mindset, but make sure when you get that abundance, you know how to use it.
I think in the context of business, it's important to be tight on the money. I remember I had an investor that came on board to one of my old companies, and he was like that. And it was actually amazing because he made us... He kind of made us be more he made us be more careful with the money.
Yes.
And then when fuck ups happened, it wasn't too bad. And our risk tolerance in the context of me and my best friend and my business partner was extremely high. Whereas this guy's was extremely low.
Yeah.
He's more of an employee kind of guy, and it kind of met in the middle and actually worked in our favor. It was really good. Let's talk about scarce mindset in the context of personal though, because when we're talking about shopping at Woolies, if we just steer a little bit away from business in this sense, and we talk about the mindset that you might have with scarcity in a personal life like that, do you think there's any positives to that, especially when you're a high growth person? Because for me, I think, and this is an interesting take that I've been thinking about a fair bit, is all the little things that we stress about weigh a lot. I think if we remove all the little things that we stress about in our life becomes so much easier. How much are fuel prices? Why has coffee prices gone up from $5 to $5.50? Why is the milk this much in the thing? So the farmers can get paid. And if we remove all those little stresses that people don't realize how much they play on your mind, like when you're thinking about fuel prices and you drive past fuel stations, then you're going, oh shit, they're $2 instead of $1.90. It's like a full tank costs a few bucks more. I want to get your thoughts on scarce mindset and if you think there is any benefits in your personal life.
This is good. This is fun. It's like a thought experiment. Okay, so here's where, and this is I always think about things from the lens of different people's shoes. So I think about, as you shared that, and the potential audience member. And my first thing that goes to is I'm a single mum. I've got 2 kids. Like, Chris, that sounds great, but I have to worry about the fuel because I got to feed my kids next week, right? So I think there's this balancing act to understand that everybody's situations are different. So that's like part one. And then does the scarcity help?
I think in the context of a high achiever as well is what I want to say. So someone that's striving for greatness.
Yes.
Because there's obviously who are we speaking to, but I did preface before in the context of a high achiever, because someone that is striving for greatness and wants to have a lot of money.
Then I agree with you 100%. Because the reality is that the piece there that they have to consider is the opportunity cost. So what was the opportunity cost of worrying about the fuel on your drive and the cognitive load that's compounding over time compared to if you use that mental bandwidth to think about your next opportunity, which can create you a lot more abundance than that one thing. And even down to contextually, we were talking about fuel, milk, and this. It's okay, the totality of that is $200. And the totality of worrying and cognitive load might be an hour. Well, in an hour, you can make some pretty good like headways to create far more than that in the high achievers context. So
I think the problem is the subconscious effect that it has.
Yes.
I think it's how much it's playing on your mind subconsciously when you're doing everything else.
Correct.
Because I think if you have that little thought, it bottles up a little bit, and then that will rub off on other things as well. And I think it's with not just fuel prices and all these little things. It's actually just worrying about the little things in life entirely. We're just talking about in the context of money with this example.
Yeah. And that's when I say cognitive load is like 90% of our processing power is happening subconsciously. So like having that conscious thought and then like you're saying, bottling it up, it's going to be happening subconsciously and load over time. So I definitely agree with that. And I also agree with it from a point of around decision making. So that's like thinking about things, thinking about prices being scarce around that, but also around decision making, which is like worrying about every permutation of a potential decision. And through that, you're spending time, and not making a decision. I think that is equally as dangerous in terms of the cost as literally not moving. Does that make sense?
No, the opportunity cost is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think when I speak to all the high achievers that I work with and get to speak with, what I'm learning is the more of a high achiever they are, the quicker they can identify opportunity and act on it and move. What you notice is all these people move so quickly.
I'm so passionate about that.
But then equally fail fast and they can fail quickly.
Yes.
Because again, the opportunity cost, if you're sticking out in something that's not going to work because you're worried about ruining your ego or your reputation because you're failing at something, the opportunity cost of being in that thing that is not working is far greater than what people are going to think, when in reality, a couple of weeks goes by and they've forgotten about the thing that happened in the first place.
So quickly they'll forget about it. So quickly. When you realize that everybody is in their own world and they're thinking about things from their own lens, even when you're driving in that nice car, they're not like, wow, that guy's so cool in that nice car. They're like, wow, I wish I had that car. Like you realize like it's not worth stressing about what they're thinking because they're going to forget about it so quick. They might make a little headline, might make a little comment on social, but like they're just going to move on with their lives because they care about, they're thinking about themselves.
Yeah. Before the sale, did you have much media press, and was there much stuff going out online about you and how good the company was going, and was there much?
None. So the decision point to make the cookbook was the decision point I've got to download Instagram. So I what I was really good at in the business was putting the blinders on and thinking about nothing else. So like if you ask me about current affairs, I'll be like blank because I just don't pay attention to them because I realize that that's not really going to serve my mission and my purpose, rightly or wrongly. Sometimes it's awkward in a sales meeting when someone asks me like, oh, how was the AFL on the weekend? I'm like, don't know. So I had to go, okay, how do I make this cookbook? How do I sell $1 million worth of copies? And I was like, well, follow the blueprint. And the blueprint, I put people like Inspired Unemployed in terms of personal brand and turning business into $100 million business for better beer and like that. I'm like, how do you do it? Eyes, attention, personal brand. So that was the moment where I started to think about Instagram, started to download TikTok and started like trying to create the content engine. Before then, I was just like in the shadows.
But I guess in your immediate friend group and all the people around you, they would look at you even before you sold as, fuck, this guy's really successful. He's going really well. Would you say the people around you were thinking that way?
I don't know, actually. It's an interesting question. So like, I think they would know that I was incredibly like ambitious and wanted to be. But I think when they saw the end state compared to what they thought it was, it shook a lot of people. They were like, wait, what the because like, when we started as a signboard company. We were installing signboards. And so like a lot of people didn't even know what we really did. They thought like, oh yeah, it's got like a little business. And like the context is, I have many friends who are tradies, engineers. And so what we were doing was just so different that I don't think they ever kind of conceptualized. And I'm really conscious, like I freely talk about money because I don't see it a problem. Money kind of, everything runs on money. But I don't flaunt it, right? So like I wouldn't sit down with any random mate like, oh, we did 40 million revenue this year, right? Because like that's weird out of context. If they ask me, shit, happy to say. So I think they never knew some of those details because they didn't ask. And so then they saw it, they went, oh, fuck. Yeah.
No, where I was trying to get, because I was really interested in if you had ever had a moment where, you know, it was kind of like people thought you were doing so well, but you were battling demons and you weren't sleeping. And you had to deal with this thing, this polarity between how people viewed you and how you actually viewed yourself and what was going on in your life.
Absolutely.
Because those times are the ones that I've struggled with a lot as well. But I guess with having a social media presence and an audience, a big challenge for me sometimes was when I'm going through real tough times in business. Nothing's going well. I'm getting slammed on my face. No one's watching, but I have to get back up.
Yeah.
But everyone else I'm getting hundreds of messages about how amazing I'm going. And I guess I'm just wondering if there was times where on some extent you felt like people thought you were one way and you didn't feel the same way about that.
There's times to this day. It doesn't even have to be in the business, right? It's like you go through a week and things are not feeling 100% and you're getting those messages in the DMs or you're getting someone putting you on a pedestal and you feel like internally you're like, I'm a fraud. Like there's so many, like the role as a CEO, like, and having to I guess to be like a sieve of bad things happening to the business. Like part of my job was I had to have these discussions and negotiations and know all the deep understanding of the business, or we had 12 weeks left at one point in terms of money in the bank. I can't put the emotional load on all of the team, right? We're 400 people, so you have to put on a brave face. So I think the context of that is like that happened all the time. And then you do go home and you're like, I think that's why it's so important to surround yourself with people who've been through a similar journey. And unfortunately, I didn't have that, but I had my brothers. And so we could be really real with each other and to talk about those things, but then you put on just the world's bravest face. But I can imagine for you, like it's another layer because you've got then, like you're putting on the smile on the video and then people are like, man, I want your life, bro. You're like, oh, fuck.
Try and walk a day in the shoes. Those times when you have to like put on a face for your audience, not for your audience, sorry, your staff. And then come. I think that's so important, being able to change the way that you're speaking and being viewed based on who you're speaking to, especially as a leader and a CEO.
Yeah.
I guess what would have been so important in those times for you when maybe you were struggling, you had to go to certain people, everyone's so excited because it's payday and you're like, we're actually in the red this month, or all those tough times.
They wouldn't know.
It would have been, they wouldn't have known, but it would have been really important that you made sure that Holly wasn't your punching bag when you got home. And I guess when you said, for the most part, I was strong, calm, collected, but then she would see me on my downs and she was there for me when I really, really needed it. But I guess it would have been really important to make sure that you didn't put off all your problems on her when you got home, hey?
I never did. And what I was guilty of was more going and putting on the face for her too. I think I was more guilty of the opposite, where, like for I mentioned the insomnia thing and it was her that said to me, like, let's go for a walk, something's going on. And I was like, no, I'm totally fine. I'd put on that brave face at home too. And she was like, you haven't slept in 3 days. You're not fine. So I think my reverse is was probably not bringing her into the fold of like the real emotions too. And so I think that was probably the biggest trap for me, is putting on a brave face for everybody. It was everybody but me. And at times I was like, no, because the more you do that, the more you bottle it up. So I'll give you a prime example. I would have, a customer who might be walking away, or something that's happening bad from the deal, that the deal looks like it's going to collapse, or something like horrendous, whatever it is. And I wouldn't tell the shareholders. And why? Because I would think about, okay, if I tell them, that's going to create emotional load and then they won't be able to execute on their thing, I'll just hold it to myself. And so that's cool, but that's why you go through, that's why you explode. So you have to find that balance. Don't make punching bags, but also have someone to share it with.
Yeah. Do you think when you did have to break down and open up and Holly got it out of you in a sense, I'm sensing that she always initiated these chats.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you did have those and you had to get vulnerable and deep, and obviously you're trying your best to not, because you don't want to show that side, I guess, in a sense. You want to be this tough and you don't want to get her worried and scared and put it on her, right? Do you think those vulnerable times and those lows that were shared together, and she knows what you're going through and you're open, do you think that strengthened the relationship with you and her?
100%. Yeah. And the version of wasn't necessarily that I'm trying to show face for being the tough. It was more that it was always about me, didn't want to burden someone else. You know, so I think the younger brother piece in me was like, I'm probably overly empathetic, where I share sometimes with my friends and family, like I don't use the horn, like the horn in the car. Because I'll think, and this is legit, this is going to make me sound like a freak, right? I think about, well, if I beep that person, what if they're having a bad day and that's the final frontier and they jump off a building tonight? And I'm like, I won't do it. Like my horn has like never been used in my car.
I don't beep the horn either. I don't think they're going to jump off a cliff, but I do know what you're saying there.
You know, so it's always based on like, oh, I don't want to burden you. Like, I'll take that burden. But man, like, you know, the other day I'm on the plane and I was just thinking, you know, I was writing my journal and then I was just thinking about Holly and I just sent her this message like, oh man, like I just kind of like shared like how I was feeling, how much I love her, like all the stuff she's done. And it's always those times and those moments of the crescendo of shit that happens and you work through it. Those are the things that pop into your mind. Those are the things you remember. And so that's why it is important to have those things, even though in the moment it fucking sucks, but it definitely brings you closer. Like even to, you know, I said about the brothers, I got to bring that home. It's like after that moment, we've never been better. You know, we all, at the end of the deal, we all bought houses in the same suburb. You know, everybody's close and we all call each other like every few days. Like, it's never been better. And it was because of the stress of the moment, what we were able to uncover, that's made it that way.
I think it's the polarity between the good and bad and how far that is that make the connection stronger and stronger. Because if they've experienced like the lowest of lows, and then they get to experience the highest of highs, there's comparison, there's polarity between your experiences together. And I think that in itself builds a bond and a connection like no other.
100%.
And I think when I look at like more on the relationship side as like as Holly, as your life partner, she's experienced all that with you. And like, so she knows, again, coming down to this, like, I'm deserving of all this shit that I've achieved, that we've achieved. Like, she's experienced all of it. And I think that makes it really, really strong. I think when you said before, it wasn't to make me this tough guy.
Yeah.
I reckon masculinity and like this whole thing, like being a tough man is kind of thrown around a little bit. They're like, oh yeah, just don't show any emotion.
Yeah.
But I truly believe that like true masculinity is the polarity between how deep and vulnerable you can get and how strong you can go. It's like you have those sad days, but then you get up the next morning and you go and do that. You don't just sleep in because you had a shit night. And being able to show how low you can go, but then how strong you can be mentally and physically as well within the 24-hour period, like that shows how strong you actually are. Would you agree with something like that?
100%. I like 100%. The facade of being perfect all the time is not the thing. And like, you know, even as you shared that, I thought back to some of the times in business, like where I would say to a team of 400 in our town hall, oh, this morning I was crying because I was stressed. Like I would share that with them and people are like, holy fuck, like what? Because like they would expect the facade. But that's what like creates like authenticity and like, and yeah, that's cool. I like the way you framed that. It's good.
Makes it real.
Yeah.
Like,
life's real, man.
like you're human. Yeah. You're not a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think people that only want good are wanting a lie. It's not possible.
Yeah.
You can't have good without bad. And then coming to terms with that is where you actually start to have good because then there is comparison. I think even as an example, moving to Melbourne, I expected sunny days. Don't know what I was thinking, but I expected sunny days, right?
Rookie era.
Yeah, it was horrible, right? So I got here the first week and it was just raining and cold and freezing all day and every day. And I actually was having a pretty shit life the first week. I was like, I need to go back home. Lucky my place is still free in Burleigh Heads, 1 minute walk from the beach. I'm just going to do that. Maybe I need to go to Bali once every 2 weeks just to get some sunlight. I was panicking.
Yeah.
And then I just woke up one morning and I said, Chris, you were moving to Melbourne. Like, you know there's not going to be sun every day. Remove the expectation of sunny days. And then when I did that, I actually started enjoying life. I think like expecting good all day, every day is wanting a lie. And the sooner you can remove that from your life, the sooner you can actually start to enjoy life. As we said earlier on, it's like you remove the expectation, you're not going to be disappointed. And it's the same with everything that you're doing in life. And then if you painted a picture to all of your 400 staff that your life is perfect, they're probably not going to be able to relate to you in the slightest. They're not going to form a bond. They're not going to see you as much of a leader because there's this divide between you two.
Exactly.
I think it's powerful to have that.
So it's really interesting as you talked about that, the good piece. I heard something this year, which the person as they said it to me didn't think it was very profound, I'm sure, but it hit me in the moment. I was like, man, that is so true as a human. We were at the place called the Bali Time Chamber. I'm sure it's popped up into your Instagram 1,000 times. And we're there training, kind of like setting the year up. And I was on my 5th coffee for the day, which is obscene for me. And it was 9:30 a.m. And I go, man, I feel good. I want another coffee. And the guy looks me down the barrel of the eye and goes, that's the problem with feeling good. You want to feel more good. Oh. And I was like, that is so true. I was like that. And so to that point, it's like you consistently want the good, more good, more good. It's like, you need to have the discrepancy between those two things so that you know what actually good feels like. And on your 6th coffee, I didn't feel more good. I felt terrible.
Definitely.
So that I got the discrepancy. Powerful. Yep. Powerful shit. I don't think you realize, but like it got me good.
That is powerful. Toby Pierce, I had him on the show. You're familiar with Toby Pierce?
I am.
So Toby said something which was really interesting about how he got into BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the reason he did was one of his mentors said to him, you're the CEO, you're the face of this thing, you're getting treated like a king all the time, you're getting all of this praise, you need to get beaten the fuck up.
Oh, that's so good.
And he's like, and they said, he's like, you need to do something where it's you versus you, and you can lose regularly by someone that you never thought you were going to lose by. Oh. And he went into BJJ and got humbled by a little Asian dude when he was absolutely jacked.
Yeah.
And he went, holy shit, life isn't all wins.
Yeah.
I need to get beaten on my face. And then he took that lesson, because then when he actually got beat down in business, he wasn't surprised because he's been beat down in a different context. But it's the actual lesson of, like, you can't always win. And I was even at a talk last night with Ryan Holiday.
I went to that.
I went to Ryan Holiday last night. And obviously his book that went absolutely famous is The Obstacle is the Way.
Yes.
It's like the obstacle is the way. Like the hard shit and the adversity is the way. Because if there's none of that, then there's no rainbows with no rain.
Exactly.
And I talk about this concept a lot. All my regular listeners is probably going like, mate, you always talk about this good and bad yin and yang polarity. But I don't think people truly understand, when you understand that, like life becomes so much more enjoyable. You can go through all the ups and downs.
Mate, 100%. And I must say, shout outs to Toby. I've never met him in person, but if there's one person whose things come up on my reels that when he speaks, I'm like, my God, like his ability to articulate and then like have really profound things in a short, concise period of time. I'm like, that's why I'm not blowing up.
You can tell.
He knows his stuff. Like he's sharp. He's sharp. He's very good.
Obsessed with his craft.
Yeah.
And you look at someone like that and go, you love learning. You love reading because your vocabulary is through the roof. And you can just articulate this thing with no and ah.
Yeah.
What I kept trying to do on that show was I was trying to make his concept simple. I was trying to Andrew Huberman science, but with his unpacks. But I want to, just before we wrap up the show, I want to talk about this phase that you're in now, where you're post-exit. You've actually now left Domain. You're a free agent. You're your own person. You can do whatever you want. And this is obviously, you're working on the cookbook, which is your biggest focus at the moment. Would it be from a business standpoint, would you say?
About 50-50. So that, and then the like mentoring / advisory, that would be the other 50%.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk about a topic that I like to ask a lot of people in your shoes, just because people look at your life now and they go, oh, you're set. You've got all the money. You can do whatever you want. No problems with that.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a bit more of a vulnerable question. Like, what do you think your biggest challenge is right now in life, post-exit, post everything that you've been doing?
Man, I love that question. That is fucking gold. Okay, let me start with like the frame for everybody to understand, which is something that I learned really quickly. The way the human mind is designed is like dopamine, our reward and motivation system, is there to make sure that we're in our cave. We're going to go chase the gazelle. We're going to kill it. We're going to eat it. We're going to be full, but we need it again tomorrow to go get the next one. We can't be full forever. And so everything comes back to baseline. And so when you think about, like if I think about from my position now, and I go, oh, but if I had $1 billion and I was on that yacht and I just flew my chopper to the yacht that I got off my private jet, then I would be super stoked. All that happens, that becomes your new baseline, and you're going to need something. You're going to need something to push you. So to your question is like, what is the challenge now? I think the reality of life where it is today is like a big part of it is kind of like, I never had imposter syndrome the entire way through the business. Like I'm really lucky and fortunate. My eldest brother, he shared with me many times, he felt that feeling of imposter syndrome. Like I had an amazing job yesterday. Can I do it today? And I never had that. But it started to creep in a little bit these days where like, it was even this week I went for my first run after a month. I'd been running every day, 7 days, but I busted my ankle. And it was in the morning, it was 5 a.m. and I was like, you're done. Like you can't run 8.5 Ks anymore. Like, come on, brother. And like, so now it's like, it's like that ringing in my head, which is like, you did that incredible thing. You got that number. You're going to be able to do it again? And so it's like that wrestling with like, making sure that the next thing I'm doing is because I truly want to do it and do it for the right reasons, not because I need to better the score so the next Google search looks even better. And but what if I don't? And then I'm a one-hit wonder. And so it's just like that. It's more like a wrestle with the mind. Like that's part of the challenge. And someone incredibly wise said to me something really profound as I was bouncing another business idea with her. And her name is Bridget Loudon, and she's a founder of a business called Expert 360. And she goes, Frank, you can't do that as your next business. She goes, you're Frank Greeff capital to the world. You're 30 years old. You just had that exit is so big. Your next thing has to be bigger. And like, it is true, but that's also like mentally really tough. And I can see that with Fred Shabesta. Like Fred Shabesta and I have caught up a few times. I can see that wrestle, which is like, you've done an amazing thing. His business is 600 million in Finder. And I can see he's like wrestling, like the next one has to be bigger. And it's like, it creates like this new unnecessary pressure. And so that would be the current challenge of my mind, is just wrestling that away.
I think that's that mind. Firstly, the mind game is our biggest enemy, right? It's our mind. But it's a blessing and a curse because it's got you to where you are today. Yeah. Wanting more. Yeah. And we have to recognize that when we are living this sicko life where we want to like where we want to do this stuff which is extraordinary, I guess you could say, it's obviously a path less walked, which means it's going to be more challenging. That is a cost that comes with it. Correct. Always wanting more. As you said, the baseline just keeps increasing. Yes. Our normal changes. Yes. And whatever your normal is how you're going to feel. And that's why I think it's really interesting, because sometimes I ask this question and I get an interesting answer. Like, for example...
Not today, though.
No. No. Yours was actually interesting because imposter syndrome is... I think it's a forever battle. I reckon the more you climb, there's new levels of imposter syndrome.
Well, I've learned that now.
and I like it. Your answer is so valid for so many people. I remember what this is interesting though is a lot of people talk about parenting and how much of a challenge that is, and because coming back to this normal thing, right? If the normal is my 18-year-old kid drives around in a $300,000 Range Rover. When their friends hop in the car and say, nice car, man, and he goes, yeah, it's all right. His normal's so high. Yeah. It's an interesting one because you need to make sure that they're not in that. And I think the only way for someone to say that and it be okay is he has driven in that because they've experienced the levels of norm. They haven't started. I reckon a recipe for disaster is putting someone's normal from the get-go up so high. Do you think that parenting is a hard one now that you've got a little boy? Have you thought about how to parent, and is that a challenging one for you to navigate?
Ad nauseum.
Especially that you can give him the world, but you need to choose this balance?
So it's like the greatest gift my parents gave me was believing in me, loving me unconditionally, and like backing whatever it was that we wanted to do. but it didn't have the financial element to it. Now, we had food, we had a roof overhead, we lived a good life. But it wasn't, here's the angel check for $1 million, or here's your first car. None of that. But that was part of the biggest gift they gave me, because it created a hunger and a drive that we wanted to do it. Give the Range Rover Sport to my son at 15, it's going to, in my opinion, I believe, it's going to make it really challenging to want to push further. And so one of the biggest things that I ask people, so I'm lucky and fortunate I've met some great people in business and that are parents, is I'm like, how do you solve for this challenge? And I'm trying to all the time. It's one of the things I did this year is flying business is sweet. I love flying business. Great. I did it for the first time ever last year, and I was like, never going back. And then this year, I was like, we're going back. And it's like, why? We can fly business. I was like, because I don't want Oscar to grow up and be 17 years old, and he's like, I've never flown economy. And the first time he flies economy is when he's going to school, he's in the Goldie. And it'd be really, it's unrelatable to all his friends. I'm like, that is setting him up for disaster. So we're going to fly economy until he's old enough, and then I can put you in economy by yourself. So I think it's a conscious effort, and I don't know if it's the right or wrong thing, because I've only been a dad for 2 years. He's still alive, so that's cool. He's a great kid, so that's great. But I got to learn it and figure it out. But that's something I wrestle with, because even with the context I just shared with my parents, is you can't help but whatever little leg up you had, it's yeah, but I had a roof over my head. My dad did teach me commercial skills for business, and it's you were always destined for that, Frank, because your dad knows about money. It doesn't matter what it is. And I could see that would be one of the toughest challenges. Imagine putting yourself in the context of someone whose father or mother has had incredible success, and then the next generation had even way bigger. Forever it'll be yeah, but you got that. Do you know what I mean? And I think that'd be really challenging. And so I wrestle with that. I go will Oscar ever feel like I won this, or it'll always be oh, Dad won that? And I'm fuck, let me figure this out.
And I guess the feeling of not feeling like you've been given everything, is a shit feeling in itself too, because I was on a retreat about a month ago called Vision Quest, and there was one guy there that wrote down his biggest thing that plays on his mind is he feels like he's been given everything.
It would be. And
you're at a retreat, mid-20s, or no, definitely older than that, and he's still thinking about the thing that that plays in his mind the most is that he just feels like he's been gifted his whole life.
Yeah.
His house, his job, his girlfriend, everything. Apparently his mum wingmaned his girlfriend and everything. Apparently everything.
Shout outs, mum.
and I'm here thinking imagine that thought. The biggest thing that makes me feel so good and proud of how far I've come is the shit that I've had to go through to get it. So then when I get it, I go, I fucking deserve this. We spoke about this so many times today.
Yeah.
But it's being able to go, this life that I have achieved, I deserve. And I think no one can strip that feeling away from me. So I'm not near having kids anytime soon. But when I do think about that, I go, how can I try and, because I'll be able to give my kids the world, how can I try and find this balance of giving them enough so that they don't look back and say my childhood was shit, but equally they go, oh, I'm thankful that I went through some hard time because now I actually have comparison and I can enjoy the life that I have now.
How I've been thinking about that is also around teaching value. So teaching the value of things, i.e. there's certain work that's required. Even Holly has an incredible mindset about this, where she said, when Oscar's old enough, he's packing the dishes, and she goes, but not for pocket money. She goes, that's because you're part of this home. And that is just a requirement that we all put in to be part of this home. So it's not even here's the pocket money because you did the chore. It's no, that's just baseline. And I really like that. So different things to establish what value is of money, but then also perspective. If I think back to the most powerful moments of my life is when my parents took me back into South Africa, and I'm 12, 13 years old. And that's why I say life wasn't that terrible. We still went on 2 or 3 overseas adventures in my childhood. We flew into South Africa, and we're coming in at nighttime, and there's just all this darkness, and then this great divide of lights. And I said to my parents, what is that? Mum's that's 11 million homes that are shanty towns that don't have electricity. And you're 11 million people are living in tents. It's yeah, that's the reality. And then you land into Johannesburg, and like you truly get to see what okay, this is what like not having money looks like this is now. And so creating that perspective, like if you're always going to the best and most luxury accommodation and flying business class on the way there, and like that's your life picture. I think having those moments where you do things like that and experience it, you create the perspective and create the divide, so then you can, I don't know, hopefully create some kind of value to what it means to have stuff.
I love that. I think that's amazing. And just before we wrap up, is there anything else you've been thinking about recently or pondering on that you'd want to share?
No. I have. It's something that's been. I have this hypothesis right now, so I'm just going to share it.
Let's go.
And it's just based on all the information I've been listening. So I listened to a lot of information around AI and like the macro sense of what AI is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. So whether it be the Sam Altmans of the world, or people building large language models, or going to events where someone's talking about it. And I've come to like the opinion, which probably many people have, which is I think the world is going to change so dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years that I think a lot of people are misunderstanding what an exponential curve looks like. So, for someone in the video space, having seen, what the AI could do last year to now is like, it's unfathomably better. But next year we're on this trajectory. And then you look at countries like the Philippines or like India, and I think the Philippines, 90% of their GDP is outsourcing. So 90% of the population is doing tasks like writing back emails, customer calls, and stuff like that. Like the scary reality that I see is like those jobs completely get replaced. And so why I share this is because I go, okay, like it's coming, it's happening. And so I've been thinking about like that next business venture, and like I'm thinking about like the reverse of, everybody's trying to run towards the AI. If there's a young person listening today and you're 22 and you're studying software engineering, I hate to be the world's worst person, but like the race you're racing against AI, knowing about software engineering, and right now AI can make an individual software engineer 220% more efficient at their job. In 2 years, like I worry that it becomes irrelevant. So the skills that I'm thinking about, like teaching my son, and I would encourage other people to think about, is like, what are the things AI can't do? And there's a lot of those, and I would double down on those. So one of the things I noticed, and you would probably get it, way more than me, is like the constant DM in Instagram, which is like, hey, I'm a video editor. I can edit your videos. Here's a free one. The worst case scenario, you get a free video. You've heard that. You've heard this over and over again.
Stop sending them, by the way.
And you hear that over and over again, right? And why do I pick that one up? I go, well, because out of the hundreds I get, not one has ever phoned me. Not one has ever seen me in person. And so I'm really bullish on human connection, because that is something that the robots can't replace. So if there's skills that I would encourage people who are falling back onto technology right now, is like, learn how to be in a room with someone and create an emotional connection, a feeling. Learn how to like understand emotional intelligence, because I think that skill set is going to be one of the most sought after, powerful skill sets there are when AI replaces all of the jobs that can be solved for via text and language and that kind of stuff.
They can't create human connection, but they can create connection. And that's
Correct.
The scary part.
Correct.
Is people are forming connections with robots as well.
Oh yeah.
And that is interesting. But I do think another awesome skill set to be learning is making sure that it's not about honing in on one particular skill. It's being able to know the baseline of as many skills as possible, because if you can, human-powered AI, as you said before, is going to take things to the next level, where you can 20x someone's productivity with AI and one person.
Yeah.
And so being able to know a baseline of a skill and let the AI do the rest, and be able to plug into that and have human-powered AI is where you're really going to take off. But yes, I do think emotional intelligence and being able to understand people and communication is probably the skill sets that I would be honing in on to make sure that you're better. Because that I think that's the power, being able to, that'll unlock a lot of other doors, because that's a hard one to learn.
Correct. And that goes through so many different, like, it doesn't matter what role or what you think or what industry, those translate. And then even beyond just the human connection is just think about what are the things that robots can't do, like, so construction. Hey, the AI ain't going to take that job. Like being a tradie, that's a great bet for the next 10 to 20 years. It ain't taking your job, right? Certain people, and I've heard this on content where people are like, they're kind of optimists, which I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist. I just kind of think I'm in the realism game. Is like they're like, it's like the Industrial Revolution. We figured it out. The difference is the void that is created in time. So it's going to happen so quickly because people at a board level are going to be like, how do we make a 10% uplift in profit this year? Oh, simple. We just get rid of all these jobs. And they're going to do that. I was only at a dinner 2 nights ago where we were talking about the largest packing distribution facility in the entire world has just invested in robotics to solve the entire process except for the bubble wrapping. So robots can't work with bubble wrap yet. The investment was $90 million. There was 90,000 people employed. The investment will be paid off in 1 year. And you think about every sector, that's robotics, but now you go like AI and all this stuff. There's going to be a void, which is time, and there won't be enough, I don't believe, hopefully I'm wrong, enough time to solve for all those jobs. And so I don't say that to scare people, but I just say that to like if I was listening to this today and I'm going, okay, I'm starting my next business, and there's so many people diving into like the AI agency and stuff like that, and like those might be great, but I think the reality is that there's a lot of people running at that same problem. I would take a counteractive view and go like, what can't it touch? Because that's like a 5 to 10 to 20 year play. Mic drop.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think just as we conclude up the show, I think that ties in really well with potentially like there'll probably be like a universal income at that stage where everyone starts getting paid a baseline of money because there's no jobs and they need to live. And anyway, we could go down a rabbit hole with AI. We're going to wrap up. We're going to wrap up to the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate you, and I want to commend everything that you're doing, and your story is awesome. And I'm so pleased to have you on here. And everyone check out Frank. I'll leave all of his deets in the show notes below. He also has an awesome podcast called Chew the Fat. I really wish I could find someone that makes trailers just like you do because they're bloody awesome. Go and check out Chew the Fat and Frank Greene on Greeff.
So close though. Frank Greene is a great company, but in this context, come check out Frank Greeff.
Frank Greeff. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have made it to the end, thank you so much. Leave us a review on Spotify or Apple. It helps the show grow, helps us keep getting amazing guests just like Frank back on the show. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so we can keep growing together. We are signing out for this week, and I'll see you guys next week.